I worked on a small farm in Kentucky back in 2016. The job itself wasn't anything special, just basic labor helping an old couple with their land. Cleaning the barn, herding cattle, watering crops. What made the place different was the Scarecrow. I remember the first time I saw it. It stood nearly 6 feet tall, dressed in an old denim jacket and a sun-bleached cowboy hat. Its head was made from a burlap sack stitched roughly to form a face, 2 buttons for eyes and a crooked black thread for a mouth. It stood alone at the far end of the southern cornfield, facing the woods. I asked the owner, Mr. Walter, about it. He just chuckled dryly and said, "It's been there since my daddy's time. Just leave it be." I thought he was joking, but the longer I stayed, the more I noticed something was off. First, it never stayed in the same place. Each morning when I checked the field, the Scarecrow would be standing in a different spot. Sometimes near the fence, sometimes closer to the barn. At first I figured it was the wind, but it was mounted deep into the ground, solid wood driven at least a foot down. One day, I mentioned it to Mrs. Ellie, Walter's wife. She went quiet, then softly said, "Just don't look at it at night, and never touch it." That felt ominous, but I shrugged it off, until I started hearing things. One night around 2 a.m., I was woken by 3 knocks on the barn door where I slept. Just knock, 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 then silence. I grabbed my flashlight, stepped outside, but saw nothing. The field was soaked in moonlight. Then I panned my light to the edge of the cornfield and froze. It was standing there, the Scarecrow. At the edge of the crops, only about 20 meters from the barn. But it wasn't supposed to be there. The day before, it was right in the center of the field. I backed into the barn and locked the door. Didn't sleep a wink that night. The next morning, it was back in its usual place, perfectly still, like nothing had happened. I started keeping a journal, marking every time I noticed its position had changed. On full moon nights, I dared to peek through the window. Once, I swear I saw it standing between 2 corn rows, head tilted slightly, like it was watching the barn. The worst night was during a heavy rainstorm. I was tired of being scared, so I decided to confront it. Around 10 p.m., I grabbed a flashlight, put on my raincoat, and headed out into the field. Rain slapped against my face, wind howled through the corn. As I got closer, I saw how old the Scarecrow truly was. Mold had crept up its arms, and the burlap sack smelled rotten. But what disturbed me most, its button eyes glistened in the light, like they were wet. And there was another smell beneath the rot, like dried blood. I hesitated, then reached out and touched its shoulder. It was ice cold. Then I heard something behind me. I spun around, nothing. But when I turned back to the Scarecrow, it had tilted its head, just slightly. That was enough. I bolted back to the barn, heart racing, refusing to look back. I locked the door behind me and sat shaking with a shovel in my hands until morning. I didn't mention this to anyone, but I knew it was aware of me. The final night I stayed there was the worst. Mrs. Ellie had a minor heart attack, and Walter had to drive her to the hospital. Before he left, he pulled me aside. "Whatever happens, don't go outside after midnight." His words rang in my head like a warning bell. Around 11 p.m., the power went out. I lit a candle and went to the front window. And that's when I saw it, standing on the path leading to the front porch, the Scarecrow, closer than ever before. I stood frozen. I grabbed the nearest thing I could, a shovel, and cracked open the door. But when I stepped out, it was gone, vanished, except there in the mud were long warped footprints, not quite human. They were too long, split like hooves or claws. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up until sunrise, shovel in hand, listening to every creak and gust of wind. The next day, Walter came back. I told him everything. He didn't act surprised. He just sighed and sat down, eyes heavy. "That Scarecrow wasn't mine," he said. "It was already on the land when we bought it. My daddy tried to burn it once. That same night, the crops turned black and 3 of our cows were found stiff as boards with eyes wide open. Since then, we've left it alone. There's something inside it," he added, "and it doesn't like being watched." I quit the next morning, packed up, thanked Walter, and walked away from that place without looking back. To this day, every time I see a Scarecrow, I shiver, because I know now they don't always stay still. It was the fall of 1994 when I found myself working on a farm in a small rural town. The harvest season was in full swing, and there was something strangely magical about the amber glow of the evening sun against the backdrop of endless fields. It was the kind of place where time seemed to stand still, the kind of place where you could almost hear the earth breathe. I had always been drawn to the countryside, so when a local farmer posted an ad for seasonal help, I eagerly signed up. The farm was massive, with rows of corn stretching far beyond the horizon and a large barn at the far end of the property. The farmhouse was an old two-story structure, weathered by time but still standing strong. The family that owned it had lived there for generations. They seemed like the kind of people who wouldn't say much, but their silence was a comfort. I took my room upstairs in a corner overlooking the fields. From my window, I could see the whole stretch of land, and as the sun set each night, I couldn't help but feel a deep connection to the place. The work was hard but simple. Gather the harvest, repair fences, and clean the barns. But it was the nights that unsettled me. One evening, as I was finishing up the day's work, I saw it. It started as a flicker in the distance near the cornfields. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light, maybe a firefly or something similar. But then, as the night deepened, it grew more distinct. Lights. Several of them moving slowly across the field. I leaned out of the window, straining to get a better look. The lights weren't like the steady beams of a flashlight or the glimmer of stars. They wavered, swayed, as if they were floating. It didn't take long before I realized that they weren't natural. Curiosity got the better of me, and against my better judgment, I decided to investigate. I grabbed my flashlight and made my way out to the back door, stepping lightly on the dew-covered grass. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and decaying leaves, the harvest's final breath before winter's grip. I followed the lights, keeping my distance. They led me to the edge of the field, near the edge of the woods. At first I thought they were maybe lanterns held by farmers working late, but as I got closer, I noticed that no one was carrying them. The lights danced, moving slowly, as if they were being guided by an unseen hand. They flickered and swirled in the air, their glow casting eerie shadows on the crops. The soft, rustling sound of the wind through the corn was the only sound, aside from the occasional creak of the trees. As I stepped closer to one of the lights, it stopped. The other lights continued their erratic dance, but this one just hovered in place. I reached out instinctively, but the moment my fingers brushed the light, a chill ran through my spine. The light pulsed, brightening, and then dimming again. It was cold, colder than anything I had ever felt before, and it sent a deep, unsettling shiver through my body. Suddenly I heard a voice. "Leave them alone." The words were soft but unmistakable. I spun around, my heart pounding. Standing at the edge of the field, barely visible in the moonlight, was an old man. His weathered face was shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, and his clothes were tattered from years of hard work. His eyes glowed faintly in the dark, a strange, ethereal light reflecting in them. The old man had a presence that was both calming and terrifying at the same time. He stood there silently, just watching me, waiting. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. "They're not for you," he said again, his voice lower now. "These lights are part of the harvest, part of the land. You don't understand." I stood frozen in place, the pulse of the light still echoing in my mind. I tried to speak, but my throat felt tight, my voice trapped. What was he talking about? What lights? What harvest? Before I could gather my thoughts, the old man turned and slowly walked into the woods, his form melting into the shadows like a fading dream. The lights flickered once more, then slowly disappeared, swallowed by the night. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, the silence pressing in on me. Eventually, I made my way back to the house, my mind racing with questions. The next day, I tried to act normal, but I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled deep in my bones. Every night, the lights returned. They danced across the fields, wavered in the air, and every night, I felt compelled to follow them. But each time I did, the old man would appear again, standing silently at the edge of the woods, watching, waiting. As the harvest drew to a close, things began to take a darker turn. One night, I followed the lights once again, but this time, I didn't stop when the old man appeared. I kept walking toward the woods, my legs trembling beneath me. The lights were brighter now, pulsing in the dark like a heartbeat. I was almost there when I heard the sound. It was a rustling, a whispering from the trees. At first I thought it was the wind, but the sound grew louder, more distinct. It wasn't the wind at all. It was something else, something ancient, something hungry. I turned and ran, stumbling over the uneven ground. The lights followed me, flickering in the darkness, and the rustling grew louder. My breath came in gasps, my legs threatening to give way beneath me. I barely made it back to the farmhouse, slamming the door behind me. The lights outside disappeared, but the rustling sound continued, echoing through the night. I could still hear it now, even in the safety of the house. The old man's words haunted me. "They're not for you." The next day I left. I packed my things and walked away from the farm without looking back. The lights never stopped, but I couldn't be a part of it anymore. I've never been back to that town, and I never will. Sometimes when the wind is right and the air feels thick, I still hear the whispers from the field. And I wonder, what would have happened if I hadn't run? What was waiting for me in the woods? And the lights, do they still dance in the dark? Or have they moved on, looking for someone else to follow them? When I was a kid, my parents used to send me to stay with my aunt and uncle on their farm in northern Illinois every summer. It was the kind of place where the sky stretched forever, and the only sounds at night were crickets and the occasional lowing of cattle. Peaceful, on the surface. But there was one part of the farm that none of us kids ever felt right about: the root cellar under the old barn. It wasn't part of the main house, but sat beneath the rickety wooden barn at the edge of the cornfield. You had to lift a heavy wooden trapdoor and climb down steep stairs into a damp, musty space lined with shelves of dusty jars and rusting tools. No one ever used it anymore. My cousins and I used to dare each other to go down there, just 10 seconds, just one step, just touch the bottom and run. And every single time, we'd bolt out before reaching the last stair, claiming it was too dark, too cold, strange. The adults laughed it off. Old farm air, they'd say. Smells like time. Years later, I was 19 when my aunt and uncle took a 2-week vacation to Arizona and asked if I could house sit for them. I figured, why not? Free food, a peaceful place to work on my college assignments, and a few nights alone in a farmhouse with nothing but the stars. Everything was fine, at first. Then came the third night. It had snowed heavily that day, covering the fields in a thick white sheet. Around 1 a.m., I was lying in bed reading when I heard it. A low, rhythmic banging sound. It wasn't coming from the house. It was deeper, beneath it. At first I thought maybe a pipe had frozen, but no, it was too steady. 4 knocks, pause. 3 knocks, pause. 4 again. It was deliberate. Reluctantly, I threw on my coat, grabbed a flashlight, and headed out toward the barn. The wind cut through me like a knife. Everything was still, except for the snow crunching under my boots. When I opened the barn door, it groaned like something waking up. Inside, it was colder than outside. My breath hung in the air. I crossed the dusty floor, my boots leaving prints on the old planks. Then I saw it, the trapdoor. Slightly ajar. I hadn't touched it. No one should have. Against my better judgment, I opened it the rest of the way. A rush of air blew upward, cold as death. My flashlight flickered as I pointed it into the darkness below. The light barely touched the bottom. I stepped onto the first stair. Wood groaned under my weight. I went down slowly, 1 foot at a time, hand brushing the stone wall for balance. About halfway down, the air changed. It got wet. Not humid, wet, like breathing inside a storm drain. Then I heard it, breathing. Not mine, heavy, slow, wet, like something was just beneath the stairs. I froze, and then the breathing stopped. I didn't wait. I turned and bolted back up, heart hammering, slammed the trapdoor shut, and shoved an old workbench over it. Then I ran back to the house, locked every door and window, and sat in the kitchen with every light on, clutching the flashlight like a weapon. Around 3 a.m., just when I was starting to think maybe I had imagined it all, I heard a voice, calling my name. It was soft at first, gentle, familiar. It was my aunt's voice. Only they were still in Arizona, hundreds of miles away. The voice came again, clearer this time. "Come on, honey. Just help me with something in the barn." No. I stayed frozen in the chair until the sun came up. When morning came, I went back out to the barn. Everything looked normal. The snow hadn't been disturbed, no prints, nothing moved. But when I opened the trapdoor again, Carefully, cautiously, I noticed something different. Carved into the third step down with a knife or something sharp were 4 words: "Stay out, not yours." I slammed the trapdoor shut and didn't go near it again. That evening, I called my aunt to ask if they had ever heard anything strange in the barn. There was a pause on the line. Then she said, "Oh, that old cellar? Your uncle filled it in years ago. At least I thought he did." I didn't sleep that night. I left the next day, cutting the trip short, and never went back alone again. Later, I did a bit of digging through the county records and old newspaper archives. I found a few mentions of that barn. Turns out, before my uncle bought the farm, the property belonged to another family. In 1949, their youngest son disappeared. They searched for days. Dogs, police, volunteers, nothing. No body, no trace, just gone. The last place he was seen, walking toward the barn.